Hello and welcome to the final sessions of the day. Today our session is all about embedding skills and behaviours to drive change. Now that's a big title, so let me unpack that a little bit for you. Change is a constant in our lives. We see it in our personal lives and in our professional lives. For organisations to grow, they need to get ahead and stay ahead. And to do that, they invest heavily in research and data to inform and transform their strategy, their culture, their categories, their brand positioning. But change is hard, we all know that. And you know that, you all know the very widely touted statistics that 70% of change management programs fail. IBM have it at about 60%, but whichever statistic you choose to go with, I think we have perhaps all lived the reality where change programs haven't perhaps delivered all that we hoped they would and really delivered the business impact that we hoped for. Now, there's no silver bullet, and I'm not here to pretend that there is. But many of the factors cited as contributing factors to why change programs fail all ultimately lead back to the embedding phase of the project. Now, embedding isn't generally considered to be like the sexy part of the project. It's the final piece of the jigsaw. It's where the rubber hits the road. So our session today is about us sharing our belief about why embedding is important, why we need to think strategically and holistically about embedding, and consider all the different factors that contribute to making the embedding phase a real success and driving business impact. Now, talking holistically about transformation would be too big a topic, so today we're going to specifically focus on insights. Insights are the lifeblood of our organizations. They fuel decisions and ultimately should fuel action. When I talk about insights, I don't just mean the addition of human truth and tension that perhaps is the common definition. I'm talking about all the factors that contribute to insights. I'm talking about the data management platforms, the brand trackers. All of these are accelerators for growth and underpin our insights functions. Now, I'm delighted today that in our session we are joined by Oslando Desouza, who is the Global Head of CMI for Home and Hygiene at Unilever, and will be talking to us a little bit later in the session. So my name is Kimberley Burbidge. I am a director in the Organisational Performance team at Kantar Consulting.
My name is Hjalti Rognvaldson. I'm an associate director in the same team.
Thank you, Hjalti. It would be very hard for me to pronounce Hjalti's surname. Now, today we're conscious this is the last session of the day. We're perhaps the only thing standing between you and either picking your children up or perhaps that first beer of the day. Now, we want to practice what we preach. We are going to talk at you, but we also believe that people are a crucial part of the embedding process. So in this session, we would really like to hear from you. So please do use the chat function to share your perspectives, perhaps your questions. We're going to be using Slido to ask you some questions. And I'm particularly thinking the latter end of the session when we have Oz with us, please do ask your questions to him as well. So please be active and not passive in this session. So our first question to you is, does this picture I've painted around change being difficult resonate with you? So to what extent do your insights and research deliver impact and behavior change in your business? So we invite you now to embrace the chat function. I'm hoping the poll has popped up on your screens. So please just tell us what your view is on that. What do you see in your organizations? Now, Hjalti, you've got the iPad. Are you beginning to see any responses coming through?
I hope it's on everybody's screen. You should be able to
30-second delay.
You should be able to vote. There's a scale there on 1 to 5, so 1 to 10. Sorry, 1 to 10. And I hope that you can all see it. And I would like you guys to just tell us what are we seeing. Ooh, got answers flooding in. Right. Okay. So we're seeing a lot of 5s, 7s, 6, a couple of 10s. Yeah. Nobody so far has gone for a 1 or a 3. Okay, good. If you've answered 9 or 10, we would love to hear some comments in the chat if you can. If you can share some stories, if you can share some examples about how you're actually going about embedding your insights, that would be great to have some insight about that. I think the rest of our audience is going to be very interested in learning about that. But essentially, for all you guys that are voting around kind of 6, around 5, 4, this is very much based around what we hear from our clients. This is very much based around what we unfortunately see in a lot of organizations. Ooh, the 8 is going up. I think people are trying to get the average up. But essentially, the key story, the key thing that we need to remember is that we need insights to have proper embedding. The embedding is so important, and it cannot just be left at the back. So in many insights organizations, you've got fantastic people who are creating great insights. They're using innovative techniques to triangulate different data points, but in many instances, they're just failing to make that impact that is necessary. So for any sort of insight program, as for any change program, we believe that the insights need to be embedded for maximum impact, which includes planning from the start. It includes mapping of relevant stakeholders, and it includes taking that audience on a journey from discovery to activation, to really thinking about that entire journey from the start. And we are going to be talking about this from essentially 2 lenses. You have the data and sources, and then you have the people and kind of skills, behaviors, and mindsets. Because essentially the challenges that we see is that it's rarely actually about the data. So you have most businesses in the world, especially global organizations like the ones that we work with, they have a wealth of data. They have capable individuals who are managing it, and they've got great insights that are coming out of it. But the challenges that we see often have more to do with the awareness of the sources. So thinking about how to access them, how to fully adopt them within an organization, what decisions to really fuel. So that comes down to not only the insights organization, but also the entire marketing and commercial and just the business, really, and making sure that you can have those decisions made based on the best data that's available to you. Very often it also has to do with the necessary support. So if you think about the expertise, which very often lies within a single individual or a single team. So it's not traveling across the organization as it could, which is of course a never-ending challenge, which impedes the speed of implementation that we can have. So the speed of implementation, which can travel between business units, it can travel between global and local, it can travel between countries. So we're not getting the scale, we're not getting the synergy, and it can lead to double work and overinvestment, essentially. So finally, around that, we need to think about the necessary behavior changes. And these are behavior changes that we are ultimately trying to achieve within our consumers and customers. But it's also about the organization, our stakeholders, the business leaders. But then what are the behavior changes that we need to think within ourselves as insights professionals? And these are the ones that you'll see on your screen right now are shifts that we have seen repeatedly and are very much shown in our latest research, which is called Insight 2030, which will be out next month. And this shows a lot around the need for us to evolve, the need for insights professionals to evolve their skills, to evolve their mindset. So instead of only thinking about getting that perfect insight, we need to be thinking about how to influence, how to use storytelling to bring that to life in the organization. Because the insight function should always be a driver for growth. It should be something that fuels growth, something that fuels business decisions. So we need to make a way from just making sense of the data to really making sense of change, to be acting as change agents in our organizations. So this will enable us, this mindset shift will enable us to move beyond the research and the data toward making better business decisions, leading to higher impact and better activations. Now, if you think about the final shift in capability that we need to see, is that we need to move beyond that thinking about training as a one-off, as a day away, and then we all get back to our jobs and we work better. We need to think about it more in terms of on-the-job coaching and on-the-job learning. And this goes for both employees as well as managers. So employees need to be thinking about the learning being a constant, something that is an always-on, something that you need to fuel your job, something to drive your growth, your personal growth in your career. But in terms of managers, we need to see them thinking about that on-the-job coaching every day, really making their teams feel more comfortable with change and really feel more comfortable with having that influence. And really, I think this is really shown in the transformational journey, as we call it, from awareness to acceptance to adoption. So if you think about it in that way, a lot of businesses actually invest a lot of money in the awareness stage. So it's a lot on thinking that if you create all the promotional material, you implement the great system, that everybody's going to just use it immediately. So it's the thought of build it and they'll come, if you remember the Field of Dreams movie. The story is actually different. And I'm going to tell you about a little bit of a story about one of our clients. So this is a global beverage company who had invested over $1.5 million in their global brand governance program. It was a really impressive program that could essentially have enabled their marketing and sales teams to make really quick decisions, react to change very quickly by using data, but nobody was essentially using it. So all the wealth of insight was pretty much being wasted because they hadn't invested beyond that awareness phase. So we worked with them to really devise this implementation program, where the first step was really to ensure that the right people had the access to the platform. Did they know where to find it? Did they know which data they needed to use? Did they know which moments they needed to use it at? Did they have the login details and the links to actually access it? The second part of that was really to make sure that the model was understood by everybody. Think about it this way. We talk a lot about meaningful and salient brands. We talk about mental availability and physical availability. But do our marketers and our sales leaders actually understand the definitions of all this terminology? Do they understand the KPIs behind them? This includes why it's important, why it's being measured. What are the decisions that you should be looking at making using this data? So really trying to move that from that awareness phase into that acceptance stage. And then finally, it was all about the adoption, to really trying to reinforce the change. And to do that, you really need to map out how these programs, how these insights, and how this data can be embedded into the organization's biorhythm. So for this particular program, we worked with them to map the right stakeholders, to really think about the crucial moments in the planning journey that these insights were being discussed. What are the crucial meetings that our insights champions need to be in to be able to bring that source of truth that can fuel that decision making and really help drive growth in their organization. So by mapping it out in this way, thinking about the change curve from I get it through to I love it, and then finally I live it, you can actually ensure that the adoption is going to be better than if you just invest in an awareness program. So you need to be thinking about that behavior change throughout. And if the example shows you anything, it would be that it's rarely just about the data and the tools. When it comes to embedding, we need to always look at the elements of the operating model. We need to examine the structure. Do we know our roles and responsibilities? Are people aware of the KPIs that they're following? We need to think about our people. Do they have the right skills? Do they have the right mindset? Do they have the right behaviors? What is the behavior shift that we want to see within them? We need to think about our processes. How can we enable ourselves to work better with speed, with efficiency? How can we best implement the global and local dynamic, the dynamic between markets, the dynamic between business units? And then finally, there are, of course, the tools. And the tools should act as enablers because they're the ones that give us the data. And the data is always a means to an end. And the means to an end is to help you deliver your strategy, which is why this triangle that you're seeing on your screen right now is underpinned by the strategy. So Kimberley, I think it's time to bring it all to life a little bit and hear how these principles are implemented with Unilever.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hjalti. So now is the important moment where I get to welcome our guest, Oslando Desouza, who is the Global Head of CMI for Home and Hygiene at Unilever. Oslando, I'm glad to see we've color coordinated today on our outfits. It's perfect. Oslando started his career in data at Nielsen and at Ipsos, and has since forged a very successful career at Unilever, working across many geographies, living in many countries and many categories, from deodorant to food to hygiene and home more recently. I know you've spearheaded many projects, and you've been a huge advocate for change in sort of launching Axe in Japan, in championing Knorr across the world. And we're delighted to have you with us, because I think there's probably no one better placed to talk to the role of insights in organizations. So thank you for joining us, Oslando.
Thank you, Kimberley and Hjalti, and it's a great pleasure to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Brilliant. Oslando, we've got a number of kind of questions today, and we're really keen to hear about the role of insights at Unilever. So perhaps, given all that we've said and the picture that Hjalti and I have been painting about sort of the importance of the embedding process, could you please tell us sort of about perhaps the biggest challenge you believe you face sort of in Unilever when it comes to embedding insights?
Yeah, so I think, of course, there are lots of challenges. To start with, I think the structure of organizations itself forms a challenge. We are designed in project teams or in divisional teams, and the whole objective seems to thrust actions down from top to bottom. And this works well to execute many of our plans, but is not perhaps the best organization structure for insights to travel and flow freely across these different silos. And as you know, very often when you embed something, it's because you see a steady pattern of this insight emerging. And these patterns sometimes are not very evident across the organization. And this is true of almost all big organizations. And that's where I think the insight function, whether it's the sort of external partners or insight managers, can play a unique role in driving this embedding, because they are present in almost all parts of the organization and can form this network that can drive things. The other challenge you touched upon in the previous session, I was listening to the advertising session, and you had this graph which showed how consumers are getting more and more annoyed with advertising. It's seen as clutter, something that sort of just disrupts your day. And it's true about everything. The number of emails you get today, if you get yet another email, it's not really something you're going to look at. So I think, how do we communicate these insights and embed them in an engaging way, bring them to life in a way that sticks in people's minds? After all, we are often consultants on how our brand should advertise. I think we can apply that same logic to ourselves and say, how do we advertise or talk about our insights in a way that they become memorable in the whole organization? But perhaps the biggest challenge, if I have to think of the biggest challenge, I think it's related to our own mindset. And I think Hjalti talked about it, about our own identity, how we see ourselves as an insight person or as an analytics person. One of my colleagues, Malu, she said it best when she said, my job begins after the debrief. She said, it's almost like that's when I have to embed all these insights into actions in the organization. And somebody else, described it as a 60-20-20 kind of phenomenon. If you ask any good insight person, they'll tell you, I've got to spend, time on the problem definition and understanding, and then time on analyzing it and executing a solution which gives us the answer. But actually, it's 20% time perhaps on the understanding of the problem, 20% on executing the solution, and then 60% of the time embedding the insights into action in the organization. And I think we need to see it as a critical role we play in insights if we are going to multiply the impact of these insights in the organization. So I think this is perhaps the biggest challenge that we are facing, and which we can definitely step up and make an impact in our companies.
Thanks, Oslando. And I think that analogy of the sort of 20-20-60 and the weight and the importance that we really should place on the embedding part is really important, because I think too often we get tied up in like the aha moment and the insight and the thing we should do and how exciting this data is. And actually we forget about the point where we really need to, think through the formal and informal processes that allow that insight to live and to be executed and activated in the right way. So I think that 20-20-60 is something that definitely has stuck with me from what you've talked about. So I guess, the flip of that is that I know you've been on this journey for a long time at Unilever, and this is, you've identified some of these challenges and really moved things forward and put in place kind of solutions. So, perhaps you could tell us about some of the actions you've taken, acknowledging those challenges to really shift the dial and to successfully sort of embed insights in your organizations and get rid of the barriers.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think CMI as a whole has been on this journey, and perhaps about 6 to 7 years ago, when Stan Unathan, who I'm sure you guys know, was our EVP of Insights before. CMI was not often represented in the most important forums of the organization, and there was a forum called the CEO Forum, where every year in pre-COVID days, the top 200 leaders of Unilever met for a few days to discuss their plans for the next year and what are the most important issues facing the company. And Stan managed to get a slot on that session, almost like a keynote speaker. And his session was so provocative and so engaging that he's became a permanent feature in every CEO forum after that. And then he sort of said, listen, guys, you've got to inspire and provoke the organization. And that spread across CMI. And now in every possible leadership meeting, whether it's the category leadership team or country leadership team, there's a regular CMI slot. And we are sort of always trying to drive and engage. And in fact, embed by sometimes repeating the same insights. You'd be surprised how often you think you've embedded something, and then 50% of the audience says, oh, amazing, I've never heard this before. And you think to yourself, well, I presented it 2 years ago, but what the hey. So in fact, on my own leadership team meeting, I've got a regular slot called What's New CMI. And my whole objective is actually to get as many slots as I can. And if I got 3 last month, so that was a big win. But the idea is to make sure every month you are able to talk to the business leaders in a way that provokes them in a relevant way that embeds these insights into the organization. I think Hjalti talked about the biorhythm of a company. And Unilever, like every company, has a biorhythm for the year. There's a planning session, there's an integrated business process meeting. It's those critical moments when CMI needs to inject those insights back into the system for them to be embedded. And I think we've become really good at that as a practice over the last 6 years. So that's one of the ways in which we are embedding it. The other way is a much more formal way. There is a team within CMI called the CMI Gym, whose objective is actually it started out as an upskilling team that focused on training. But they've actually done a wonderful job, not only focusing on technical skills around analytics or machine learning, but talking about, let's not call them soft skills anymore. Let's call them human skills, because that's apparently the key word these days. But human skills like storytelling, like strategic influencing, and even bringing things to life. We had training on how to make your PowerPoints more effective, how to use video. We live in a TikTok generation. So I think that's the kind of training that's also important. So the CMI Gym has been focusing a lot, and all this leads to insights getting embedded. And finally, I think it's something which everyone can do, everyone does. We have also been using our experts, partners. Kantar, of course, is a big partner of Unilever, along with others, and this expert opinion often helps to embed things. Recently, I was talking to the business about investing in one of the key areas which I think will develop in the future. And I invited one of the Kantar experts, Richard Herbert, over, and he doesn't work with me on a day-to-day basis, but because he's an authority on FMCG in Europe, these experts help to land an unbiased and an expert opinion, which also helps to embed insight. So I think these 3 things we've done really well, which is engage at critical moments, really have a formal way of embedding insights through training, etc., and also using all the expertise at hand.
Thanks, Oslando. And I think you have talked to so many elements of, the pyramid that Hjalti talked about and linked back to that transformational journey, it really is about thinking holistically. And I guess it's great to hear that Unilever has made so much process on both the structure, the formal processes, how it's embedded in the organization, the people, tackling sort of capabilities. And those capabilities you referenced are a very good mirror for actually a piece of work that is launching very soon that has been done by Kantar, Insights 2030, has really identified actually that the storytelling, those human skills that you referenced as being still so important for our colleagues in Insights to support the embedding process and really ensure that our brands are human-centric and that we bring our brands to life. So, thank you for sort of really illustrating, I guess, all of those examples and bringing the theory to life for us. Now, I guess I had one sort of last sort of formal question for you, which was, if you had £500,000 to spend on kind of I&A tomorrow on your Insights function, what would you spend it on to continue that journey and continue to elevate and accelerate Insights within Unilever?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I'll have to say that, when we talked about the mindset being the biggest issue, and I think when people sort of worry about a new role they have to play, which is new in their eyes more than in reality, then training actually helps in storytelling, in actually influencing. And I think we don't spend enough investment, maybe as a sort of industry in this area and we should. So I think really focusing on giving people the confidence to play this important role of embedding insights and the skills they need. Because after all, there are some people who are natural born storytellers. But for the rest of us, practice makes perfect. So I think it's an important skill. I would spend part of the money there. And the second, maybe half the amount, I would spend on developing the right content. While a 78 slide presentation might be the right content for a full work group, which is wanting to know every detail of the piece of research you have done. But the rest of the organization needs bite-sized content in an engaging way that can tell them a story about the insight that they need to use for their part of the business. And when I look around the industry today, I think that while there are some amazing examples of such content, there isn't as much as there should be. So we are also looking at, using some of these bite-sized content to really drive this. As I say, it's a bit of a TikTok generation, and maybe there's a 30-second attention span. So let's work with that. A lot more people have looked at some of the insights I've shared with them on WhatsApp than a formal email. So use the channels that people are on, engage with them, and create the content that can help embed the insight. Because in the end, that's what you want to do.
Really fascinating to hear your thoughts on kind of WhatsApp. I think we are all attention poor. And what you've articulated about how we embed insights is very aligned with the previous session, which was about sort of brands and the stories they need to tell. They also talked about the importance of storytelling, entertaining content, provocative and purposeful content. And I think the same is true for embedding insights within our organization, with our internal audiences, as much as thinking about kind of the end consumer. Now, I'm conscious that we wanted to allow some time to hear from the audience, and my colleague Hjalti has got control of the iPad. If you have questions for Oslando, please do post them in the chat. Or if you have thoughts from earlier, if you were one of those people scoring a 10 for what you're currently doing, please do share any reflections that you've got or any examples with us. We would love to hear those and to feed them into the session. And the discussion. So Hjalti, what have you got coming through kind of on the chat and the iPad?
Well, so we've got a few very good questions, and some of them are very much pointed directly to you, Oz. And I think the first question here is, which I actually find quite interesting as well, is it's an interesting comment about the job beginning after the debrief. So how do you ensure that the insight teams don't think that their job is done after the debrief? How do you ensure that they take that extra step and go further?
Yeah, I think, so there are several things which we've been looking at. So one of the things we are really good at is the inspiring part and the provoking part. But then there is a part about growth and transformational action. So has that action happened? And I think more and more, when we're looking at the performance of our own teams and ourselves at the end of the year, we kind of give more importance to what is the action that the business took. And did it really take that action? And what did you do as part of that action transformation process? And very often you get remarkable stories of people who've sort of gone up to the head of the business and said, what's happening on this insight that I, sort of identified. So I think there's the focus should shift on the actions taken and the role played in that whole process, and not only on generating it. And I think as we look at our own performance and see our role in driving growth, we'll find that that makes a big difference. The second thing is that there's a top-down behavior change. I think as leaders of this insight industry, we have to start with ourselves and say, like, this is what we will focus on. And the more stories we tell of our own successes and failures at getting transformational action done through embedding the insights, the more the next generation of insight folk will sort of look up to that and say that's the way to go. So I think the onus also starts with us. And just like we tell stories of the impact, we should also tell stories of the process of embedding it. So I think these are some of the things that we can do. But I think most importantly, if we link it to performance and evaluation of performance, that will make the big transformation. Because right now, a lot of the performance is down to what insights or ideas you may have generated. And I think that's just half the story. So a bit of a step change there. But I think the journey has begun in many places.
That's really fascinating, and very much links to the second question that was kind of highlighted here on the iPad that I'm looking at, is that the embedding is a challenge within stretched CMI teams, because the teams are always going to be stretched. They've got a lot of responsibility, and previously it kind of feels like the responsibility of actioning the insight or using the insight has lain with the marketers, that it's the marketer's responsibility to actually action. How would you go about and actually influencing the insights team to stop thinking about that and taking it further?
Yeah, I think the world has changed in so many ways, but one of the ways is that making choices and focusing on the right thing has become almost like business critical now. We all have hundreds of projects, and that many of them are not going to make it, make it big. So I think the onus now is not only on the marketeers, but also on us as an insight function. I'll give you an example. Like in some of our businesses, and some of our brands, when I look at the 10 or 15 projects that they have, each project leader from marketing thinks that his project is the most important thing, of course, and they should, because that's the energy they need to drive the project. But as an insight person, what's going to be big for the company. And it's your job to make sure that action on those big ones actually happen. So while the marketer will do what they need to do, our duty to make the right choices has become even more paramount in this age of plenty of actions, but very little resources to put behind all those actions. And therefore, focus becomes important. I think we are sort of working in a world where we're trying to do too many things. And when you think about it, what are the things which actually have the biggest value? It will be the things that got embedded in the organization and led to a successive action and growth. So when I look back on my own career, I will think about all the things which actually happened, not all the things I said, but nobody did anything about it. So I think this is the reason why I think the role of insight has become even more critical today than it ever was before, because we should take up this challenge of driving the right actions in a world where resources are constrained, but opportunities are plentiful.
Rise to the challenge and try to tackle it. There's a really interesting question here that I actually think that you should be very well placed to answer, given the fact that you've traveled across 6 countries in your role, you worked across multiple categories, and maybe you can answer this question in 2 parts from your own experience and then your own opinion, which is, do you have any advice for those that are working in organizations that are not quite as big as Unilever, where CMI might be less established? How would you get attention?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I think while Unilever is a company where CMI is very well established, it has not always been the case that every part of Unilever was equally engaged. In fact, early on in my career, when I sort of started with insights, there were lots of business partners who actually questioned whether insights are really relevant. And I think when you link insights to the growth opportunities of the company, that's when somebody can may listen to you, or you try to solve problems for people. So one of the examples very early on is that we were looking at growing the deodorants business in Asia, and the team, the person who was leading it there, was not quite sure whether any research needs to be discussed when we are talking about a new business. But we had a really good marketing business partner who had just joined the team, and she said, why don't you come with me? We're going to meet this country who is not convinced that we should launch deodorants. And I went and presented the consumer case for deodorant, why it is a human need across the world, how all teenagers go through this. And that sort of convinced the chairman of the board at that time, said, okay, we're going to kick off this project. I'm convinced that this could be something big. After that, of course, I went with her to every meeting because I had managed to link insights to the major challenge that she had, which was convincing a business to invest in something which was completely new for them. There was another time when we sort of focused on this 6P analysis, which looks at obviously, all the P's of the marketing mix to identify the issue. This helped solve a lot of debates between different parts of the organization, global, local, regional, on where to focus, because it was an unbiased CMI view. So I would say attach the work you're doing to the most important challenges that an organization is going through. And I'll be very surprised if the importance of insight doesn't just multiply by 3.
Excellent. So I think we have about 2 minutes left, and I have a question here that's maybe a little bit less left field, and it is essentially how do we attract graduates to a career in insights as opposed to the likes of Accenture or McKinsey or the more traditional consulting roles? What would be the drive to get people into insights?
So I think, there are some things about the insight function which is very, very attractive. First of all, it's the connection with people, understanding people insights. It's the connection with the business, because you are actually quite close to the business. Whether you are a partner in an agency or you're a person inside, you're close to the business problems, and consultants have this come in and then go out kind of a approach to things. So they're not there all the time, so they don't understand how the business is unfolded. I think there are those advantages, however, are difficult to perceive when you're outside the organization. So one of the things I have learned in a way to attract talent to Unilever is to give students an opportunity to taste it. So we have in the UK an apprentice program where a lot of people who have just graduated or come in as apprentices for about a year. And in that year, they are fascinated by the kind of work they do in insights. And after that, they don't want to go anywhere else. They want to join the insights industry. So I think the more we can bring young people to give them an experience in insights, I think that will transform it. But no matter what theoretical job description you put outside, is no match for the actual experience. So I'm sure that the more we sort of welcome young people, because people don't know anything about the insights function when you're outside it. It's just a theoretical thing to you. But when you experience it, you see these benefits, closeness to consumers, closeness to the business, a long-term view, an unbiased perspective, an option to learn across multiple categories and business models. They'll be fascinated. So we'll have no dearth of future talent if we go by it this way.
You've sold me on insights, actually. Oslando, we have hugely appreciated you sharing your insights today. I think you've really brought everything to life for us, and there has been some great food for thought for everyone to take away. some really good kind of concrete examples of best practice, of what has worked, of where some of the challenges are. So I hope there is lots in there for people to take away from today's session. So my great thanks to you, Oslando, for joining us. And I hope that those of you listening at home have got some real thoughts about what you can do tomorrow to embed insights and embed change in your organization. So thank you so much for joining us. And please do reach out to us with any questions about how kind of we can help you on that journey. So thank you very much, Oslando.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you very much, Kimberley and Hjalti. Fantastic.